Has a prospect told you before that I need to talk to my spouse? Let me get back to you. In this video, I'm going to show you what to do so that you can handle this particular objection. My name is Iyore. I've sold to high net worth individuals. I sold to 21 high net worth individuals in a single month, and I was sent to the World Cup for an all-expense paid trip for winning a sales competition. I've also grown a portfolio of $3.5 billion to $7 million in only 11 months. So in my line of sales, I'm going to show you how we normally would handle a case where a prospect says, let me talk to my spouse first. An objection is an indication of interest and a request for more information so that a buying decision can be made. And there are several things you can do to be able to manage and handle objections successfully. First of all, when you want to qualify a prospect to be able to determine their financial capacity, you want to determine urgency, you want to determine their decision-making process. These three things are required for you to be able to determine if a prospect can do business with you. So if a prospect says, let me talk to my spouse first, it could be that something has gone wrong. At the point of your sales process, you've not been able to qualify the prospect perfectly yet. And that's why he's saying, let me talk to my spouse first. So the plan is that you should be able to know before you get to the end of the conversation if there is anybody this prospect needs to speak to. So just in case it's a spouse, just in case it's an engineer, just in case it's a director, just in case it's a lawyer, whoever he needs to speak to, you want to be able to find out. And there are ways to find out. Now, true selling is not talking. True selling is asking questions. So you want to build your sales approach to be focused on asking questions. The importance of asking questions cannot be overemphasized, because when you sell to bring change to the life of people. You sell to solve problems. Now, you cannot solve a problem you have not found. And no prospect will walk up to you and tell you, these are my problems, help me solve them. Unlikely. In fact, if a person tells you, these are my problems, help me solve them, he may not even be giving you the right problems. Because think of sales like being a doctor. If you meet a medical doctor and you say, doctor, I'm having a headache, would the doctor just go straight to give you Panadol? No. Because in his mind, he knows that prescription before diagnosis is fraud. So before he can prescribe something for you, he needs to diagnose first. He needs to check and be sure that what you say the situation is what it is, so that he doesn't give you the wrong medication. In the same way, when a prospect comes to us and says, oh, this is what I need, this is what I want, we have to check and diagnose first to be sure that what he says he wants is exactly what we believe he needs. Because we are the experts. When I say we are the experts, I mean you and I are salespeople who are engaging our prospects out there. We are the experts. We want to be sure that we are giving the best solution at the time. So you have to make sure that you build your conversation to ask questions. So you're going to ask questions so that you can be able to identify his financial capacity. I've already dropped a video on that. I'll drop a link at the end of the video so you can watch that video. You're going to ask questions so that you can determine the urgency. The acronym is FOOD, F-U-D. Then you're going to ask questions to determine the decision makers. Now, what kind of question can I ask to determine the decision makers so that I can know, possibly if you need to talk to your spouse first, then I'll know what to do, so that I can know, possibly if there's an engineer or a lawyer or a board of directors or somebody you need to talk to. And this is important because, you see, prospects are when you sell to clients or prospects, you want to categorize your prospects into buckets so that you can know who is qualified to move the conversation to the next level. If, for example, you realize that the person you're speaking with, he says that he needs to decide with his spouse or his lawyer or his board, then you know that this conversation cannot move to the next level yet because you don't have all the decision makers present. However, if you find out that you're with he's the final decision maker, he's the only one who decides on this particular purchase, then we can move the conversation to the next level and start to talk about maybe the offer, start to talk about maybe what color he wants or what size he wants or what unit he wants. Then we can start to look at other things in terms of follow-ups to make sure that we close. But you want to make sure that early in the conversation, you determine who the decision makers are, and you use questions to do this. Now, when you want to ask questions, you want to say things like, oh, you want to make sure you ask for permission to ask questions first. You want to ask for permission to ask questions first. So how do I ask for permission to ask questions? For example, Mr. Prospect, when we meet with our clients like this, we normally like to ask a few questions. Hope you don't mind. Can I ask you 3 to 4 questions just to see how we can understand you better so that we can make sure that we meet your needs? Can I go ahead, sir? So what have I done? I've asked for permission to ask questions. Now, notice I use the word most of our other clients. I use the word most of our other clients because I want to make sure that he feels comfortable that what I'm about to do for him is something I've been doing for other people before now. So when I've asked for permission to ask questions and he says, all right, go ahead. There are 2 types of questions you can ask. You can ask open-ended questions or closed-ended questions. Now, where do they play in a sales conversation? Open-ended questions are used to begin the conversation. Closed-ended questions are used to close the conversation. Examples of closed-ended questions, generally, what's your name? What did you eat for lunch? What time is it? Now, all the answers to these questions are straightforward, one-statement answers. What's your name? Iyore. What did you eat for lunch? Rice. What time is it? 2 p.m. The conversation ends after the closed-ended question. So I want to use the closed-ended question to bring the conversation to the close, to close the deal. Now, what about open-ended questions? Open-ended questions bring about a conversation. Open-ended questions give me room to diagnose. Open-ended questions gets the prospect to start talking. That way I can understand him, I can know where his needs are, and I can go straight to solve the problems. Now, now remember in the question I asked earlier, the question I asked so that I can ask questions where I said, hope you don't mind, can I ask you a few questions to see how we can meet your needs? These are the things we normally would ask our other clients. Now, I don't want to ask more than 4 questions, max. The moment you ask more than 4 questions, sometimes I even say 3, but I can stretch it to 4. The moment you ask more than 4 questions, it becomes an interrogation. So you want to plan your questions carefully. In fact, it's important that your questions are written. Because if your questions are written, you'll be able to have them flow in a more systematic order. But if you're trying to recall your questions from your head, you find out that you may get things mixed up, the questions may not be congruent, and may not give you the best response you actually want. Let me give an example of why your questions must flow. Imagine if I wanted to ask you for your house address, and instead of me to say, what part of town do you stay, for example, and you say, Ogwebi. Oh, what street? Salvation Road. Okay. What number? Number 25. What bus stop? Salvation bus stop. Now, you see, I've asked you 4 questions. When I could have just asked you 1 question. Okay, can you describe, or can you tell me where you stay, your address and further details? What happened? I've asked 1 question, properly planned. Tell me where you stay, your address and further details, meaning all the details. 1 question, I have all the information. Instead of breaking your question into unnecessary bits. So now, when you understand this principle, you can now go straight to be able to ask your questions and understand your prospects. First question you normally would ask is an open-ended question, like I said earlier, and that question, I want to have a broad overview of who you are and of what you do. The second question I probably want to ask will be around decision-making process, because I want to determine who the decision makers are in this conversation. Let me give an example of what this question should look like so that you don't have to hear, let me talk to my spouse first, I'll get back to you. Mr. Prospect, when it comes to making decisions around this kind of transaction, maybe property purchases, maybe insurance, maybe tech, Mr. Prospect, when it comes to making decisions around these areas, can you walk me through how you normally would make such decisions to ensure that you didn't make the wrong one? Is there anybody else you normally would recourse to? Just give me an idea or how you do that. For some of our clients, they would want to talk to maybe their spouse, their board, their engineers. For you, who do you talk to make sure that you're making the best decision? This way, if there is anybody who needs to be in the room with you, he would let you know. Another way you can even ask is, Mr. Prospect, before we continue, is there anybody who you would want to join this conversation that is currently not here? Just in case, because what we have wouldn't be in the market for long. So just in case you see it and you love it, you'll be able to take action right away. Is anybody else? That can also help as well. Another question. Mr. Prospect, we'll probably have another meeting after this. I'm looking at possibly Thursday, 9 a.m. or maybe Friday, 2 p.m. In this meeting or in that meeting, who would you want to join you when you're coming for that meeting? So that at least if there's any other questions, we can be able to address all the issues and help you make a decision right away. So you see, I'm giving you 3 different ways you can ask these questions. Why am I asking like this? Because I want to know if there's somebody else he needs to bring into the room or needs to bring into the conversation so that a final decision can be made. Now, if you've done this and at the end of the day, the prospect says, I need to talk to my spouse first. Of course, that would be unlikely. But does that happen? Yes. Because sometimes when it comes to handling objections, because I see it as an objection, right? When somebody says, I need to talk to my spouse first. When it comes to handling objections, you need to realize that most cases it's the fault of the salesperson. So in this case, for example now, it may not really be my fault directly because I've already done my part to ask questions to qualify and determine your decision-making process. But it can also be my fault indirectly if I realize that if the prospect lied, but I didn't ask more questions to make sure that I tested for truth in the conversation, because there are more techniques to ask, there are more techniques to use to test for truth in the conversation. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. So today, when you go out for sales and the prospect tells you, I need to talk to my spouse first, you can even say, oh, of course, the best decisions are made with others. So I'm so glad you'd like to talk to your spouse. When can we have a meeting with your spouse? Can we do with you? When can we have a meeting with you and your spouse? Can we do tomorrow 9 a.m. or do we do Thursday 2 p.m.? Would that work for you, sir? If he's still trying to resist you coming in for the meeting, oh, sir, no pressure. No pressure. Most of our best clients today, when they met with us, they wanted to talk to their spouses. And they called us in for a meeting and we need a presentation to them and their spouses. And that's way they were able to make a decision.